Great. I'm with Ruth Zakarin, who is the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. Thanks for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Can we start by explaining what the Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence is and the kind of work that it does?
Yeah, great. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. It's something that I am always excited to be able to talk about. So the coalition was founded a little over 10 years ago in the immediate aftermath of the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School by a group of volunteers and local organizations that wanted to come together and strengthen legislation here in Massachusetts to prevent such a thing from ever happening here. And that group was very involved in what was passed as the 2014 Comprehensive Gun Reform Law, which has shaped a lot of how we think about licensing and access to guns in the Commonwealth now. And since then, the coalition has grown. We now have 3 full-time staff, which is very exciting. And we have 125 member organizations from across the Commonwealth.
Give us a sense of what those member orgs are like.
Yeah, so it's everything from community-based organizations like the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute that's actually been involved with the coalition since our inception. Other organizations doing direct outreach and intervention with communities most impacted by gun violence, with young people. It's faith communities, it's other advocacy organizations.
Big tent.
Big tent, yes. As well as some of the, whether it's Moms Demand Action or Every Time from Gun Safety or Giffords, to very grassroots efforts that are really trying to look at local solutions in their communities.
You mentioned local solutions as well as the comprehensive gun safety legislation passed in 2014 at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen that Massachusetts has led the way on common sense gun safety reform. We have also seen in the last year that the Supreme Court has directly targeted state and local gun laws and really has nullified them. What do you wish the Supreme Court justices understood about state and local gun laws before they take on their next hearing?
So many things. I guess I'll encapsulate it in the following. We know that what we're doing in Massachusetts is saving lives. We have a strong legislative package. We have more work that we could be doing, and I hope that we'll get to talk about that as well, because one death from gun violence is too many. But if the rest of the country adopted what we currently have in Massachusetts as a floor, we would see a lot fewer gun deaths around the country. And I wish the Supreme Court understood that dismantling or trying to dismantle what we currently have in place will cause more trauma.
I want to dig into a couple of things you put there. One, the suite of gun safety laws that Massachusetts currently has that is currently saving lives, and if adopted would save more lives nationally. Give us some examples of what those laws are.
Sure. And actually what I also want to highlight is we believe that through legislative change, strong policies, as well as continued and sustained and meaningful investment in community-based solutions, along with lifting up data and research, that's the package.
Mm-hmm.
That's the entire suite of what we need to really move the needle when it comes to gun violence.
The numbers and the energy.
And the energy and the investment in community-based solutions, resourcing the things that we know are working, and resourcing the people who are doing critically important and deep work in their communities, knowing what their communities need. We need to continue to resource those people and those programs, because it's about addressing access and proliferation of guns, but it's also about addressing root causes of gun violence and addressing the underlying issues that drive, particularly gun violence being so high in certain neighborhoods. When we put all of those pieces together, that's really how we make change. And that's how we prevent trauma. And so for us in Massachusetts, because we have had some baseline protections around universal background checks, the fact that we have banned semi-automatic weapons here, the fact that we have strong licensing requirements, including police departments being able to really understand who it is that's applying to have a license to carry. All of those things have really helped Massachusetts be a leader in terms of our legislative package when it comes to preventing gun violence.
So if I could paraphrase you, it sounds like you need the laws that put in place standards around access, around use of weapons, But you also need to complement that with the granular, community-driven, data-driven approach to what is causing disproportionate gun violence in certain parts of the state.
Absolutely.
There was a lot that industry could do by itself
Mm-hmm.
to make weapons safer. The technology existed for decades. What do you think industry should be doing right now to make their weapons more safe and to prevent gun violence?
Well, actually, one of the things we're really thinking about is industry accountability, which has happened in other states, and that's one of the policies we want to see happen in Massachusetts as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that when folks are harmed, that they have more ability to hold manufacturers accountable for that. So that's something that we have been particularly focused on.
And I think that kind of liability exposure would drive the adoption of access prevention technology, right? Which they have. They just don't want to use because it reduces their market.
Yeah.
But if they knew that they were going to be exposed to lawsuits because of the misuse of their weapons, they'd be more likely to. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit to our audience of implementing policy and working with communities?
Yeah, I mean, it really is about getting very intentional about social determinants of health, root causes of violence, so that as we're thinking about policies that do address access to guns, the proliferation of guns, that we're also spending a lot of time and energy on policies that address those social determinants of health. We know that gun violence is a public health crisis that is driven by racial and economic disparity. And I think it's incumbent on us at the coalition, it's incumbent on us as a society to really dedicate ourselves to addressing the racial and economic disparities that leave some communities much more vulnerable to high rates of gun violence. So in communities that don't have access to economic opportunity, by definition, you're going to see higher rates of violence. And there's so many reasons why that is. So instead of blaming individuals for the violence that they're experiencing, we need to really look at the systems, the institutions, and the policies that create that systemic inequality, economic and racial inequality that are driving forces of gun violence.
Pull the guns out of the system and invest in upward mobility for these neighborhoods.
And I talk about investing in community-based solutions. You've already heard me saying that, and that isn't just violence intervention. That's around, there are communities that have experienced chronic disinvestment, whether it's in education, access to jobs,
Housing.
Infrastructure, housing, absolutely. Safe housing is safety.
Mm-hmm.
And when folks don't have access to safe housing, or when they've experienced violence and have to go back to the very place where that violence happened, we're not investing in their safety. We're not creating the resources needed to enhance or to decrease someone's level of risk. One of the things that I do want to highlight is what we do here in Massachusetts matters greatly.
Yes.
But we need more movement on the federal level as well because we don't live in a bubble.
No, we do not. We are subject to importation of weapons from New Hampshire and elsewhere. It's a national market. And as we have seen, the Supreme Court has Massachusetts and other vanguard states in the crosshairs, no pun intended, for their gun safety legislation. And it just, to me, underscores that at a certain point it's got to go to the ballot box. We need people to vote with the same urgency around gun violence in elections in 24 and 26 that they did around abortion in 22. We got to carry that energy forward because unfortunately most Republican members of Congress care what their primary voter thinks about guns, not what their general election voter thinks about guns. And that means that frankly they're scared of the NRA. Who I want them scared of is parents and public health professionals and the young voters in their district who are going to vote on guns.
And I think ultimately, no matter how one might feel about the Second Amendment, no matter what someone thinks is the solution to gun violence, I think the place that we can all come together is that our children have a right to be safe. And they have a right to be safe in school. They have a right to be safe walking home from school. And they have a right to be safe playing in their neighborhoods after school. Part of what brought me to this work is I was holding a lot of stories from survivors. Mm. And so when we talk about data and facts, which are so important for me, I see faces of people that I have gotten to know.
Absolutely.
And whose trauma I've had the gift of being able to sit with because they shared it with me. And I think we need to tell the stories of the people impacted by this issue, the families who have empty chairs at their dinner tables and the children whose lives have been changed forever, even if they survive a shooting, their life is different.
Your life is different, and I think the July 4th shooting last year, and the 8-year-old boy, he's a twin, who's paralyzed now, and I mean, that story needs to be told, and every member of Congress needs to listen to it and understand the